6.2 is Doug Searson and Randy Von Haking, SZAM Capital Partners, the Maitland Estates Development Update. Hey Douglas. Thank you for coming out.
As I mentioned, continuous communication, 600 plus owners in Asia is not a easy undertaking. It's been challenging, but at the same time, the numbers coming out of the woodwork over the last year has been tremendously positive for us. So and I'll tail off into the rest of my dialogue, but the inevitable when you're dealing with so many people, whether you've got 6 owners of a property or 600, is everybody has to agree on that. And not necessarily in the moment now, but certainly when you want to transfer title. So that first home that you transfer title to the first owner has to sever. And that's really the core of my focus. My day-to-day work is getting to that part of the transaction of knowing I can sever off and change title. So we're, as pointed out there, we've about $100,000 out now in unsecured investment into working through with the lawyers, engineers at Burnside here, and just trying to establish how do you navigate that. Now, the last line, of course, I think everybody can appreciate is redundant. There's a bit of a curveball from March till onward, trying to deal not just with the regular course of business and our other projects that have similar situations with council meetings and, as you would very well know better than I do, not being able to do public meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been juggling, to say the least, trying to navigate how do you keep everything moving forward at the same time that you have these challenges. That's been a tremendous time draw on us, but for the most part, we've been able to get past that. The engineering part 2, phase 2, part A and B, I think I got that phases wrong. That should be phase 1. That's just wrong in the slide deck, my apologies. So that's phase 1, parts A and B. That was just a tag in to show, again, council, that we have the list of deliverables that we know we need to do. This is the point that we're at with the co-owners at the moment, and effective as of last Friday, where we are getting that connection, as I said, that one part hammered out, and the engineering that needs to be done with that. I might touch on this, I won't dwell on it, but we've had inquiries now since we listed Wingham as a potential property, a potential neighborhood, as far away as Quebec, for people who are looking for homes and stuff. I understand that's not a direct correlation maybe to what you need to solve here, because you got local employment issues and you want people locally to be able to buy homes. But it does vote well when you're talking about having, 550 some odd new homes between the two builds over the next 10 years. So just the slide, what happens next. Clearly the continuation of where we're at right now is where we'd like to be. I'm just going to bring it back up to the other slide at the end there and leave that on the screen. However, it's always good news and bad news. And I've got an obligation to report to your council what my status is in working with my 600 plus owners, not just to move the project forward in the development phase to get the draft plan approval, deliverables completed and submit the subdivision application, but what also is the ability to navigate the ownership issues as I indicated. That's a tremendous undertaking just to get the owners all to agree to allow a transaction to happen. We know the subdivision application is the most important part, and that's my focus, to get that subdivision application and subdivide the property. From there, everything kind of falls into place. As council is fully aware, I know this is a large project. There's many unique aspects to it, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of juggling. There's a lot of things that we had to do simultaneously. There's a lot of aspects that we've navigated. All, again, great words, but action is what you're looking for. We understand that. Everything was fine until about 5 weeks ago. And about 5 weeks ago, all of a sudden, we had this out of left field situation that came up. There was a serious series of events that we had a group of our owners in Malaysia come back to us and basically tell us that our numbers are wrong, our work is wrong, and that they really don't need us because this property is worth so much money that they could simply just sell the property to somebody else. Unfortunately, and I will submit my notes for council to review as well for your records, we didn't take this too seriously, but what we were told, and I reached out to your administration on this, what we were told was that council was entertaining a joint venture on this with the co-owners, which clearly would make my job very difficult. So I reached out and said, well, this doesn't make sense, and very quickly came to the same conclusion that I already had, which was this is not something that was being entertained, nor was it something that was being a directive or anything else being contemplated as a strategy. Between that time, about 5 weeks ago and now, and 5 weeks ago for the record, I did not know what the source was, aside from a few people in Malaysia who were part of our group where I get the information from them and they then say, oh, we've got this new information. But then it came to me that your local Remax real estate brokerage of record here, Renata Cyber Schlegel, in coordination with a Toronto-based realtor and a solicitor out of Toronto, we're up perpetuating and repeating this, not only to a few co-owners, but on video conferences and stating for your records that the township is in talks to JV the co-owners, with the co-owners, and the property can easily be sold to another developer without delay, with no consequences. And this type of solicitation basically continued right until this weekend. So I think it's important for you to understand that we are trying to do everything possible. And at no point do we really accept that as valid information. We didn't believe that was what was going on, as far as the conversations between your council and another party and, of course, the Malaysian co-owners. However, the reality is that it created a ton of confusion. And as we got the co-owners to a certain point to be able to accept that a subdivision application requires not only the application itself and the work and the engineering, but it also requires for them to then take that next step and know that that property will be subdivided and title will have to change at a certain point. So we did our best to put all of our resources at it. We did everything we possibly could, but unfortunately, this was a series of meetings from 4 a.m. on Sunday. I want to repeat that. This past Sunday, on Labor Day weekend, my staff, myself, we were all in my office, hosting meeting after meeting from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the morning. It's their Sunday night. That's when they like to get things done. And we were unsuccessful in convincing this small group that the prospect of selling this property at this giant premium price above our $3.18 million appraised value that the appraisers have put on this property at the stage it's at, we were unsuccessful in convincing them. It doesn't mean that they're done. It just means that I hope to be able to have that behind me about 2, 3, 4 months ago. COVID caused some delays in there, and then 5 weeks ago we got this out of left field new information from our friend at Remax leading the charge. So at this point, it's my regrets that I can't give you a definitive that we are in a position where we can have the co-owners agreed to move on to that subdivision application. It would be inappropriate for me to say otherwise. The ability for this property to be profitable for a developer, absolutely, and for the community, 100%, I get that. Everybody knows I'm from here. I was born here. I still say I'm from Wingham. I don't recognize myself as being from Waterloo. But short of sinking thousands of dollars more out of pocket into an unsecured position to go after what would be considered the Partitions Act. And I don't expect anybody here to know the Partitions Act, maybe the planners, maybe Dwayne. But the Partitions Act was really brought to light in Ontario and maybe Canada. I don't know exactly the history, I'm not a lawyer. But it's an expensive, slow process. And it is what needs to be done. Make no mistake, in a situation with multiple owners, the Partitions Act is used. But it's usually used in a case where you have an estate. Someone's passed away, someone can't be located. Not when you have 600 owners overseas. So part of our challenge was this prospect from, again, these 3 individuals, which is in my document for your records. I've just put their contact information in there, providing this idea to my owners that Partitions Act is, go to court and be done with it. But that's not how it works. how it works is that you apply to a judicial system where you have COVID-19, where you don't have judges in court anymore, where they then have to understand the file, which means, again, in good faith and in reputation, there's no way I'd get in front of you and tell you that's an easy task. It's not an easy task, but it can be done. The challenge I'm having right now is getting an agreement with my ownership group, my co-owners, that it's inappropriate for us to continue to move forward if we're completely unsecured. And I'm hoping you can appreciate that, because we keep putting money up and we can't get ourselves secured unless we have that agreement in place. And as long as we have some people disagreeing, it delays us. And that's where we stand right now, delayed. So we think that the best course of action and the remedy is the Partitions Act, and that would require another draft plan extension. But at the same time, I'm also going to have to go back and repair the relationships with the Malaysian group to figure out how to get them to accept that not only do you need to potentially solicit absolutely developers and maybe purchasers when the property is subdivided, but without a subdivided property, you have a property that's at, in my opinion, at threat to be moved back to a position where it would be farmable land with potentially a star beside it as residential proposed, and then eventually have a decision on it where that goes. None of this is the news that I want to bring today. I certainly didn't want to get up at 3 in the morning on Sunday on Labor Day weekend either and sit in meetings trying to figure out how to change the unfortunate opinion. My last statement is that SZAM Capital Partners and my affiliates at Kingwell Fine Homes, where we build and we solicit through our realtor group buyers, is still here to continue to advocate the development projects in North Huron. It hasn't changed our opinion. Our map shows that you're right there in the midst of our map. It's perfectly aligned. That's not something we drew after, you know, we put Wingham on the map. Wingham was on the map when we drew our business plan. So at this point, all I can do is rely on the mechanisms at hand, which would be the co-owner group directing me to submit a draft plan extension.
Thank you, Douglas. I know how hard you worked on this. We know how hard you worked on this. We really wanted this to work. This has been a 10-year toothache. You were the dentist that was going to take care of that, and unfortunately, you've got a toothache too. I just want to thank you for everything you've done. I hope we can work this out or something out in the future. It has kept me at night, awake at night, as you know. You already know it's kept me up at night too.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just been pure hell for me too. Because I'm not seeing a way out of this except farmland. But anyway, go ahead, Chris.
I'm just wondering, through you, Reid, why you didn't get a formal statement from us that we're not.
I contacted
That's all it
administration.
takes. Like,
Oh,
for your investors, like a statement from us saying no. Doesn't that ride higher than a realtor's comment?
Quite possibly,
It should.
but the timeline, the last message we tried to deal with was literally this Saturday. That it was suppressed, it was dealt with, it was answered, and then it came back again to. I can't describe it any other way than U.S. politics. Let's throw something on a social media board and see if it blows up something, and that's exactly what they did. The prospect of commission dollars, in my opinion, got in the way of reality. And I'm not going to disparage anybody's abilities, but it's certainly clear to me that the two realtors and the solicitor that they were using out of Toronto couldn't care less about what the progress is, no matter what they would tell me to try and convince me otherwise. I agree, a statement could, and you can do that for me. And I can certainly circulate that and certainly show them that the only way out of this is to move forward the way we present it. And we've been consistent. We record all of our video conferences. I have now 200 plus hours. And they're all recorded, as well as the one where I had these remarks that have been made to us. mean, the owners can watch it, and I can only do is push it back in front of them and state that. At one point, there was a letter generated to remind us of the importance of the subdivision approval, and we posted that letter immediately. About 4 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, wasn't that long, about 3 weeks ago. And there was a lot of positive response saying, okay, we get it. And then come Saturday, which is why I was up I wasn't scheduled yet at 4 in the morning to be in my office. It's just with the time zone difference, the messages started coming in on Saturday. And I thought, I'm just going to get up and go in and light up the video conferences. So,
Kevin?
Through you, Rick. 2 questions. One was partially answered with the other councillor's question, but were you able to substantiate any of the remarks or allegations from RE/MAX?
yeah, it's on video transcripts. It's recorded videos.
No, I meant, were you able to substantiate that, yes, there was conversations from municipality to RE/MAX?
No. And I was able to only get back from conversations with the REIV and with the CAO that these inquiries came in with regards to having other consultations, but no presentations, no meetings, anything took place with council. It's not my belief that this particular group had any intent or motivation on that avenue at all. For the most part, this group was quite content with anything that would move this forward, and I think I can be quoted back from that meeting, that same meeting where I said to the 100 people that came out to the open house that they are no different than the people sitting in that room. They're in a room over there with 100 of them going, how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this? The unfortunate thing, as I stressed, is that when misinformation jumps in the middle of between, and you're working from 12-hour time differences, and appreciation for your comment, Councillor, that you're trying to figure out what's the message that's going to help to calm down this one, and all of a sudden, this one over here lights up. It's incredibly difficult, but I do not believe that anybody in this particular group has that motivation. I've stressed to them, and then they'll be able to, I assume when we see this council meeting, I've stressed to them that if you subdivide, you're going to have a much better chance of recouping the capital you've invested by working through those phases. And if the worst case scenario, and hopefully this isn't, I don't have a planner tell me if I'm wrong, but the worst case scenario that you end up owning a few lots in the last phase because you still can't, get rid of your trust on the ownership with that agreement that you have, then that should be the worst case scenario. And I've never once had anybody even introduce the idea of residency and being tied to the line. So.
Good, Chris?
Yeah, through you, Reeve. Has this been pulled by a realtor in any of the other investment locations?
Not to my knowledge. Each one of the previous 8A projects seem to have a fairly unique situation happening. Unique from our perspective, not maybe unique from your view. Everybody's kind of stuck because of the way the ownership groups are. In Blue Water in Godrich, the property is just too far out of the development zone. It's just not of interest to anybody, so it's why it's stalled. So I don't see that happening. We do have a situation in Angus with a piece of property that's similar. There's an investment group that has 1/3 of it, who's very much in favor of just liquidating it for pennies in the dollar. And of course, the co-owners would not like to do that. They would like to see it sold at market price. So you have different interests. Wingham is the divide that's happening now is a small group of Malaysian investors who have been convinced that this property should yield them so much leverage over your community, over your council, over your local investor dollars, over my money, that we should just throw ourselves and throw that price up. Just again, for your records, our offer to them when we put the deal together for them was to recoup 100% of their capital and split any other profits above that number at a 25-75, so that they would receive 25% of every profit dollar after we developed through that. Where they are looking at a differential, I guess, in opinion, is their opinion is that they could do it today, because a realtor has told them they can just sell it today and there's no consequences, and you just start the planning process over again.
Anyone
And
else?
to be specific, when I say realtor, there's 2 of them. one based in Toronto and of course the one based here.
Same company.
Actually, two different companies.
Oh,
One is with Sutton Group Associates.
Wait, Kevin?
Let's follow up through you, Reeve. Actually, it's to staff. Is council required to accept any other development planning? Or do we have a right to say no? What I'm getting at is that they were saying that they've got so much potential leverage over council. Does council also have leverage back to them to say, well, even if you do want to do that? No.
So their first biggest problem is they've got, what, 30 days left, Doug, before the subdivision falls through?
Yeah, you've got October 5th is my application date for the application for extension. January 2nd, 2020 is the end of the extension.
Yeah, it all falls through then.
But I'm just
Because
saying
of
that
Doug
they're banking on being able to just go through and fly through. I think they would find that this council would be very adamant at dragging their feet for.
Well, again, we've been 8-10 years with this headache, and I think it's time anyway. Unless one of the staff have something to add, I believe it's 30 days, and they've got 30 days to decide what they're going to do with it, or we have the right to turn it back into pasture land. Go ahead.
Well, so through your worship, in terms of council grant an extension for draft plan approval until January 2nd of 2021. And unless that is extended by support, county council makes that decision, but they obviously reach out to local municipality in terms of what your position is. So essentially, in the absence of an extension request coming before council, it lapses on January the 2nd. Council has no, if you don't get a request for an extension, it just automatically lapses. As Doug has indicated, in terms of, in order to get the necessary approvals, if there was an extension request and subject to support of this council and county council, is October the 5th. The request for the extension needs to be received by us by October the 5th. We would then prepare a report. It would come to this council. You would then, similar to as we did before, whether you wish to support an extension or not. And if you're supportive or not supportive, whatever you recommend then goes to county council, and then county council makes the decision itself. But in the absence of an extension request, the draft plan approval lapses. You can't, I guess, you just can't go and extend it unless you receive a request.
Go ahead, Trevor.
But in essence, we as a municipality have invested staff resources to this project for 8 years. As well as Doug's firm has now invested $100,000 of unsecured money into this project. The question I have is, if draft plan approval is denied, if we do not extend it or county doesn't extend it, what is this? What are the investors to lose? Like, what is really the question about? Because they're going to lose something. They've invested capital in this project up until now. And my question is, does somebody know what that number is? Because I hear it all the time, well, we're losing something out of this. Yes, we are. North Huron is losing residential housing and potential tax income to alleviate the pressures that we have. And we know and we believe that we can get that residential housing, if we develop it. We know from information that we've got that can sell, and we know that. So yes, we are losing, but in my mind, they're losing more. But I want to reiterate that is But the question is we can't tell them that's something they have to learn on their own, I guess, that they're going to have some type of loss in this deal, other than the fact that if they continue to think that that land is worth $6 million, then I think they're going to hold on until the cows come home, if that's what they believe. So does staff know, like, what is the value of that? What is the value that they're potentially at loss if we do not increase or extend draft plan approval? Do we have an idea? Doug, do you know?
No, through your worship, as far as, so if draft, I in terms of the numbers, I don't know, to be honest. But in terms of once or if draft plan approval lapses, in order for any development to happen on those lands, and if it was by virtue of plan of subdivision, whoever is doing development on those lands essentially starts over at day one. So in terms of, as you're aware, in terms of Hutton Heights, all the work that we've been doing on Hutton Heights, whoever was to acquire that land would have to do everything we're doing in terms of all the studies, all the reports. So all of that money, for example, that has been invested in all that work that's been done, the engineering, the archaeological, the environmental, and all that, that's all gone. Whoever acquired it would have to start over, like right from scratch. So essentially, and think going back to Doug's comment, or a comment I heard in terms of, it has, as I'll call it agricultural land, it has a value. With draft plan approval, it has an increase in value, just by virtue of the fact that once you clear the conditions, then you can start developing those lands. But when you lose that draft approval, then essentially it goes to the value of agricultural land, in my mind. Because, again, you have to start over.
I'm happy to comment. Through public records and through publicized documents from 8A, you can find that the purchase price of this land was $1.6 million. The co-owners who own this land today, who purchased it from 8A, paid $11.25 million for it. So, yeah. So that's the spread. And when we did the appraisal at 3.18, we thought we'd come in at 4.5 based on market demand, but the market demand here is immeasurable. As part of my comments to council when I first presented, is that we needed to generate market here in order to actually establish a market value so that an appraiser has something to draw comparisons from. Our appraisal, our opinion was in the $4.5 to $5 million. And the appraisal came in at 3.18. And that of course was what we based our then plan to go for A and B as a way to minimize the capital requirement to get things going, establish 45 lots of market value, knowing that they're going to sell. Then we have now a market value, which means we can go back to other sources of income, investors, developers, purchasers of the other phases, and accelerate the whole process. Again, I don't believe that the motivation behind the co-owners, and I want to stress that it's not all of the co-owners who are thinking this way. It's the unfortunate reality that a small group think this way, and that just generated, in essence, during my voting process, a whole whack of people who said, I'm just confused, so I don't want to do anything. Which, of course, I think we share the opinion that's the most dangerous thing that they could have done. Whether or not we were able to articulate it properly, we take responsibility for that. But we did spend hours and hours and hours explaining it in plain language that the most important thing to do is get the subdivision application forward. So they do have something to lose. And there's many of them who are not happy right now that I'm stalled because of the situation, just as I face you guys with the same problem. You're both in the same proverbial boat on two different lakes, is what it looks like to me. And so there is a motivation for them, and I can continue the dialogue with them, and I can continue to push and seek at least the consent on an application for extension and report back on October 5th. I do take the words,
Palmer.
thank you, Councilor Palmer's advice as well. At request, I would gladly, openly take any strongly written communication that I can share with the co-owners so that it can be directly given to the co-owners and not be via third-party interpretations to help that go through.
Any other questions? Well, Douglas, you've given us a lot to think about. This is no further ahead than we were a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, you have spent a lot of time and energy. Maybe we can make something work. We don't know. But this is not what we wanted to hear. This is not what you wanted to deliver. We had such good vibes moving forward. Whatever happens, happens. I don't know. Go ahead, Trevor.
So Rita, I guess my question is that what I'm hearing is, does council right now want to continue to have Doug continue the process, at least getting the potential, the discussion of an October 5th subdivision plan request? Because if we don't get the request, it isn't going to matter to us. Like, we can't do anything about it anyways. If we don't get a request, we can't extend it anyways. So really, it's whether we want Doug to go from September the 8th to October the 5th to try to get the investors back on side to get a subdivision agreement transition, and then in the same breath, provide direction to staff to provide every letter that we potentially can to say that we're the only person we're dealing with is that individual right there. We're not talking to anybody else, and here's the motion that says that. I'm hearing that. That's what I'm hearing, because we really, if we stop now, if we don't say anything today, I don't know if Doug, I don't know if we don't say anything today, are you anticipating trying to continue to do till October 5th or was it your intention to let us ask you that? I guess I'm struggling with who's doing the request and who's pushing. I think we both want the same thing, which is we want development on those lands, but they have to ask for the request, and the only person that could ask for the request is the investors.
Correct.
So that's the part for me.
Your ballpark. What do you think?
First of all, uncharted territories. So we are a little further ahead than we were a year ago, and that's now we do have the full database of the owners. That's something that we did accomplish, and that took a tremendous amount of time to get that completed. So we are a tiny hair ahead, not much. If I have clarity through communication, documentation, and council's endorsement, I guess I'll say, that the willingness to move forward as the plan presented is there, and I need this. I need to submit a draft plan extension by October 5th, and I can get them to agree to that. Then we can continue. That investment on our part is the cost of a draft plan extension and a few more hours of video conference calls. So relatively low cost compared to the $175,000 of engineering that's required to get us to that next step on the subdivision application. So yes, I would take those steps. I'll state again for your records, as I've said all along the way, I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do for the owners and for the community, and that's where we've stood since day one, just to erase this is a windfall for our company, because it might be profitable a little bit, but it's not looking like a windfall today.
So do I have a councillor putting a motion forward?
I will move that. I'll move that council authorize Doug to continue discussions with the ownership group to get a potential draft plan approval extension by October the 5th.
I have a seconder.
And as well as recommend staff to provide Doug with any letter indicating such need that he requests as to relates to who we're talking with and who we are not talking with
The
in
church.
regards to this ownership.
Through your worship,
Yes.
the one clarification I put there is that council recommends Doug to continue, not that we authorize Doug to continue, because as Doug is not our employee, right?
That's right. So as noted by the clerk.
Okay. And you're still good with seconding?
You bet.
So I'm gonna get the clerk to read that back. And is there any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Do we have any recourse to demand a retraction from Remax?
Which are you more interested in?
Council.
The only other comment I want to make is for the people who are, North Huron cannot develop this land without the owners. We cannot do anything with that land. So I want to make that abundantly clear. We cannot do anything with that land without ownership, because we as a municipality do not own that land. So this is the only option that we have, in my mind, to continue this potential development. That's it. We don't have any other option, in my mind.
Yeah. And we have a fine deadline on this one.
Can we make a last comment?
You may, my friend.
One of the issues that may arise, assuming that I get permission, assuming I can fill out the draft plan extension, is the unwillingness for the co-owners, being faced with the price that they paid for the land and what the appraised value is to invest any more money themselves. So one of the challenges is funding. As we've been funding it, and as we will, that will be a challenge. And that will be where maybe there is some negotiating leverage from within the community, parts of the community, whatever it might be. And I say that not because we're looking for us to be funded. As we have line investors, we have $1 million investor money sitting there, was earmarked for this project. It's going to move to Hamilton now just because of the delay. I say it because the end remedy to be able to complete everything is the Partitions Act. And that is a process that requires legal to step up and walk that process through the courts. So no matter what, that process should start. And if I was a citizen or I was a local person, I'd like to see that process start. And that does not take 600 people to agree.
Having said that, though, our motion is to back you on continuing forward. How you get developers and all that again.
Understood.
You know, as I've said before, I represent the township of North Huron, and I'll stay out of. Okay.
Through your worship, so am I good to
Yes.
read the motion now? So the motion on the floor is that the council of the township of North Huron hereby recommends that SZAM continue to pursue the process with the co-owners for submitting an extension of the draft plan of subdivision, and further that council directs staff to provide a letter to SZAM explaining that the township has not pursued a potential joint venture for the property.
That's good?
That's good.
It's good, council? And I have a mover and a seconder, so any more comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor? Carries. Thank you, Douglas.
Stay safe.
Good luck.
Thanks, Doug.